My mom secretly kept a second family and used my college fund to pay for her other kids' private school. I remember sitting on the cold, cracked steps of my aunt's porch with a university acceptance letter in one hand and an empty bank statement in the other. It was a moment that should have felt triumphant, finally escaping the weight of a childhood wrapped in scarcity and secrets. But instead, all I felt was hollow, numb. The sun was setting, and I could see my cousin's kids laughing in the front yard, kicking a half-deflated soccer ball around. Their world was simple. Mine had just crumbled. But that day didn't come out of nowhere. It all started years ago. When I was 6, my father died of a heart attack. I remember it in fragments, my mother's screams echoing through our tiny rental home, the flashing lights outside our window, the way the paramedics moved so fast and so calm. But mostly, I remember the silence afterward. There were no more evening laughs coming from the living room TV, no more clinking of his tools as he fixed whatever was broken in the house. Just silence. Mom never remarried. At least, not that I knew. It was just the two of us from that moment forward. She would constantly say things like, "We're a team now, baby," and "It's you and me against the world." It felt comforting, reassuring, and for years, I believed her. Money was always tight. That was the tune she played on repeat. We didn't have cable, and our dinners were often ramen or frozen dollar store meals. Every time I wanted to join a school club or needed new clothes, I'd get a long sigh and the phrase, "We just can't afford that right now." But she always made sure to add, "Your dad left us something, though. A little college fund. It's not huge, but it'll help when the time comes." I held on to that like a promise carved in stone. So I studied. Hard. I was that kid who stayed behind after class, who returned library books early, who knew every scholarship deadline like it was my birthday. My teachers loved me for it. But when I finally received an acceptance letter from the university of my dreams, everything went wrong. Mom had picked up a second job a few years back, or at least that's what she told me. She'd be gone on weekends sometimes, saying she had to help cover extra hours at the clinic she worked at. But even with that job, nothing changed. We still lived in that same old apartment, the same leaky faucet, the same creaky floors. No new clothes, no dinners out, no little luxuries. When I got my acceptance packet, I sat down at the kitchen table and asked to review the college fund together, just to make sure everything lined up before I applied for student loans. That's when her eyes shifted, just for a second. But I saw it, the tiniest flicker of panic. She smiled and said, "Of course. It's all taken care of. I'll pull the papers this week." But the next day came. Then the next week. Nothing. I still remember the day I checked the balance myself. I'd found the login info in the old family file cabinet. I didn't expect it to be full, but I figured there'd be enough to at least get me through the first year without loans. For $112.76. That was all that was left. I stared at the number like it was some kind of glitch. I refreshed the page, tried logging in again. But no, same result. I sat there for hours, rereading every line item, every deposit, every withdrawal. Nothing made sense. Nothing matched what she'd told me. When she came home that night, I was still at the kitchen table. I asked her about it, calmly at first. She didn't even look surprised. Just tired. She said there were emergencies. Medical bills. Things came up. Life is expensive, you know that. But I didn't know. Because none of that ever showed up in our life. No hospital visits. No surgeries. No car accidents. And something in her voice, it didn't sound like panic. It sounded like habit. Like she'd said the same thing before. To someone else. About something else. That was the first time I felt it. The cold sting of betrayal. It would not be the last. By the end of that week, I stopped taking her at her word. It was like a crack had split through the floor of everything I thought I knew about our life, and I couldn't stop myself from peering into it. It started with the account history, then the withdrawal patterns, then watching her closely. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I knew, deep in my gut, that something was wrong. Terribly, terribly wrong. After that day, nothing felt real anymore. I'd grown up believing that we were surviving together, that every sacrifice, every skipped vacation, every denied toy or field trip was part of our shared struggle. But now, I started seeing cracks in the story. Little things I'd brushed off over the years suddenly screamed for attention. Like how she always seemed oddly put together for someone constantly complaining about money. Her nails were always clean, manicured even. She never hesitated to splurge on expensive skincare. And every now and then, a shopping bag would appear in her room from a store I definitely couldn't afford on my part-time wages. I convinced myself it was just stress shopping. Maybe she used coupons. Maybe she got hand-me-downs from a friend. I didn't want to believe that the woman who raised me was capable of lying. But now I knew better. And the worst part? That $400 left in the account was the proof. Not just of broken promises, but that I had never been the priority. I kept digging. There was one account listed on our shared online banking that caught my eye. It was separate from everything else, no name, just a string of numbers, and every month like clockwork, a large chunk of money would leave our main account and vanish into it. Always the same day. Always the same amount. At first, I thought maybe she had a savings stash. Something secret she was ashamed to tell me about. I even tried to rationalize that maybe, deep down, she was planning to surprise me with something for college. Maybe she was just waiting for the right moment to explain. But by then, even I didn't believe my own excuses. So I followed her. It was a Saturday. She told me she had to run errands like usual, pharmacy run, groceries, maybe swing by the bank. I said I had plans with a friend and left 10 minutes before she did. Then I parked at the end of the street and waited. She pulled out of the driveway like she always did, calm, composed. I followed her at a distance, half expecting her to notice and call me out. But she never looked back. We drove about 40 minutes out of town into a clean little suburb I'd never seen before. She parked in front of a modest house with a small porch and a green lawn. I remember watching her get out of the car like I was watching a stranger. She walked up the front steps and rang the bell. The doors swung open almost immediately. 2 boys, maybe 14 or 15, ran out to greet her, throwing their arms around her. She hugged them like it was the most natural thing in the world. One of them even called out to her loud enough for me to hear it from the car. He called her Mom. I didn't breathe. Not for a solid 30 seconds. And then it hit me all at once. Like being doused in cold water. Like being shoved into the middle of a conversation that had been happening behind your back for years. She hadn't been picking up extra shifts. She hadn't been scraping by for my benefit. She'd been raising another family. I didn't confront her that day. I couldn't. I drove back home in a haze, pulled into the driveway like I'd just woken up from a nightmare, and was trying to act normal. She came home 3 hours later with a grocery bag, and the same lie she always told. Errands took longer than expected. I nodded along. That night, I couldn't sleep. I laid in bed and just stared at the ceiling, piecing everything together. The missing money, the strange absences, the never-ending narrative of struggle that apparently only applied to me. She told me she was doing her best, that we were scraping by, that everything she did for me. But now I realized she had left me. Not physically, not outright, but emotionally, mentally, and financially. She'd walked out on me a long time ago. I just didn't see it because she left the shell behind. And that college fund? That was supposed to be my dad's legacy. His last gift to ensure I'd be okay in a world without him. She had taken that gift and handed it to strangers. Not just strangers, but replacements. That was the moment something broke inside me. Not just my trust, but a fundamental belief I'd carried my entire life. That no matter how hard things got, I still had someone in my corner. Now, I wasn't even sure if I'd ever truly had her in the first place. When the sun finally rose, I knew I couldn't pretend anymore. The truth was out, and it was time she knew that I knew. I didn't wait for her to start breakfast. I didn't give her time to run her little Sunday routine. I stormed into her room just after sunrise, still in my hoodie and jeans from the night before. My heart was pounding, and my fists were clenched so tight I could feel my nails digging into my palms. She was still half asleep when I said her name. Calm at first, but even I could hear the heat under my voice. She looked up, confused, rubbing her eyes, asking what was wrong, and that's when I lost it. I didn't scream at first, but I spoke with so much rage that it shook the air between us. I told her I knew everything. I said I saw the account, the transfers. I told her about the boys, their house, the way they hugged her and called her Mom. All of it. She sat up straight, eyes wide, completely speechless. I demanded the truth, all of it. I wanted to know exactly how long I'd been her second priority. I wanted to hear her admit, out loud, that she'd taken everything my dad left behind and used it to play perfect parent to 2 kids who didn't even know I existed. I called her a liar, a coward, and worse. And when she opened her mouth to say something, anything, I cut her off and told her not to dare play the victim. She started crying, and for a moment, it shook me. I could see her shoulders trembling, her face collapsing under the weight of everything I had just thrown at her. But it didn't matter, because I had cried myself to sleep too many times over empty plates and unpaid field trip slips, all while she was driving across town to be supermom to some secret family. Through sobs, she admitted it. She said she met the boy's father when I was 7. She didn't plan to have more kids. It just happened. She told me she was scared, said she didn't want to lose me, but also didn't want to lose them. So she chose the lie. And every year, it got easier to pretend that it was for the best. She said I was always independent, quiet, never asked for much. She used that as her excuse. Said I didn't need the extras, that I could handle it. She called it doing her best. I called it what it really was, abandonment. She left me, emotionally and financially, to raise a second family. And not only did she lie about it, she robbed me of the one thing my father left behind to ensure I'd be okay. She tried to say I was still her son, still her priority, that it was never about choosing one over the other. But I wasn't having it. I shouted that she did choose, and not once, but every single day she took money out of that fund. Every time she said no to me and yes to them. Every holiday I spent alone while she was God knows where. She tried to tell me to keep it quiet. Said the boys didn't know. Said their father didn't even know about me. I felt sick. Because of course they didn't. Of course I was the ghost. The unwanted reminder. The leftover. I told her I didn't owe her my silence. Or my protection. Not anymore. This wasn't some passive misunderstanding. This was a full-blown betrayal. A lie that stretched over a decade. A second life built on the ashes of the first. I left the room before she could say another word. I slammed the door behind me and walked outside. I needed air. I needed to stop myself from tearing the entire house down out of pure rage. Everything I thought I knew was gone. She built this house of lies. And I was going to burn it down. I started with my uncle, my dad's brother. I haven't called him for a long time. I found his number buried in an old group chat from when my dad passed. He answered on the second ring, groggy and confused. But when I told him I needed to talk, really talk, he said he'd be there in 10 minutes. I didn't tell him over the phone. I needed him to see her face when I said it. I sat him down in our living room, across from her. She looked like she'd aged a decade in a day, eyes red, face pale, still wearing the same robe from our confrontation that morning. She tried to stop me when I started speaking, tried to beg, to plead, to spin it. But I didn't let her. I told him everything. How she'd been lying for over a decade. How she had 2 other sons no one in our family knew existed. How she used my dad's college fund to pay for their private school, their hobbies, their life. How she made me live like I was her burden while she played doting mother in a neighborhood 40 minutes away. My uncle sat there in stunned silence. His hands shook. Then he asked her one question, was it true? And when she nodded, something shifted in him. I could see it, the heartbreak, the betrayal. This wasn't just about me. This was about the brother he buried, the legacy he thought was being protected. He left without saying another word to her. But not before he promised me that I wouldn't be alone, that I had family, real family, and that we were going to make this right. Within 48 hours, everyone knew. My grandparents. My dad's cousins. The aunt I hadn't seen since I was 10. The word spread like wildfire. I didn't sugarcoat a damn thing. People were furious, not just at the betrayal, but at how calculated it had been. She hadn't just made a mistake. She built a second life on top of the one she left behind and hoped no one would ever look too closely. But someone finally did. And then came the part one knew would shatter her the most. I told them. I drove to the suburbs, just like before. But this time, I walked up the steps and rang the doorbell myself. It was one of the boys who answered. He looked surprised to see me, probably wondering who the stranger on the porch was. His face reminded me of her, same eyes, same nervous smile. I asked to speak to their father. He came to the door with a cautious look, sizing me up. I introduced myself with one sentence that changed everything. I'm her son too. His entire face dropped. I laid it all out. Not to be cruel, but because they deserved the truth. I didn't come to ruin their lives, I came to reclaim mine. He listened. Quiet, stiff, jaw tight. He did not interrupt. When I told him about the money, about the college fund, about how she kept us all in the dark, his expression went from shock to something else. He didn't know. About me. About the lies. And he sure as hell didn't know he'd been raising kids under false pretenses, while another son went without. He didn't say much when I left. But I didn't need him to. I could already tell the second family she protected so fiercely was unraveling too. By the end of the week, the phone call started. First from her. Then the boys. Then the other dad. None of them wanted to scream. They just wanted answers. Some wanted to apologize. Others wanted space. I did not respond. I didn't know anyone anything, not after the years I spent piecing myself together from scraps. She had told me to keep it quiet. But silence was what kept me invisible. Speaking up? That made me real again. After everything exploded, the fallout wasn't quiet. It wasn't quick. It didn't pass like a storm. It lingered, like smoke from a fire that scorched everything in its path. My mom's world collapsed in slow motion, and I watched it happen from a distance, not with satisfaction, not exactly with sorrow either, but with something closer to clarity. The truth has a way of stripping everything down to the bone. The first time I saw her after the confrontation was nearly a month later. She showed up at my aunt's doorstep, face gaunt, eyes sunken in, holding a plastic grocery bag with some of my old stuff in it, photos, school awards, a book I loved as a kid. She said she wanted to talk. My aunt stood behind me, arms folded, glaring like a guard dog ready to lunge. I let her speak, but I didn't let her in. She didn't beg this time. She didn't spin any stories. She just looked tired, defeated, said she missed me, said she made mistakes. She admitted she didn't expect me to ever find out, that she thought she could keep both lives separate forever. But that's the thing about lies, you can't bury them deep enough to keep them from growing roots. Eventually, they break through the surface. And that's what happened. She didn't cry this time. Maybe she had run out of tears. Or maybe she finally realized that there were no words that could fix the kind of damage she'd done. I didn't yell. I didn't forgive her either. I just told her I needed space. Real space. And I closed the door. The second family imploded shortly after. Their dad kicked her out. Apparently, the trust she'd built with him was tied to the illusion of honesty. The boys, my half-brothers, I guess, must have learned the truth eventually, but I never reached out, and they didn't either. I wasn't interested in forging new relationships based on the rubble of old lies. Not then. I was too focused on reclaiming what was left of myself. I moved in with my dad's sister not long after the dust settled. She was the first person to treat me like I mattered in all of this. She didn't pry, didn't ask for the gory details. She just made me a bed, helped me with my financial aid forms, and told me I was home. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. College started a few months later. It wasn't the dream I'd imagined when I was 11, fantasizing about the future with my dad's voice echoing in my head. It wasn't cushioned by the security he'd tried to leave me. But I made it. I picked up a part-time job on campus, applied for every grant and scholarship I could find, and stretched every dollar like my life depended on it. Because, in a way, it did. I wasn't angry anymore. Just tired. But underneath the exhaustion was something else. Freedom. Because when everything falls apart, you finally get to choose what you rebuild. And I was done building on top of lies. My mom still calls sometimes. Leaves voicemails. Says she's sorry. Says she hopes I'm okay. I haven't blocked her. I haven't answered either. Maybe someday I will. But right now, I'm focused on building a life where I don't have to question the ground I'm standing on. A life that's mine, rooted in truth.